Why, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, where you guys are tuning in from. Let me double check my audio real quick. Looks like I'm coming in all right on my side. Let me know if you guys have any issues hearing me on your side. I'm going to turn down this music just a little bit and make sure I have everything set up here. How's everyone's day going so far? Where are you guys tuning in from? My name's Tyler. In case this is your first time joining these webinars, I'm dialing in from our headquarters here in San Francisco. Okay, getting echo. Let me see if I could make some adjustments here. I have my microphone. I have Spotify, which I'll turn down a little bit, and then I have my mic here. Anyone else getting echo? Let me double check. Rode mic, desktop audio. Let me turn this one down potentially. All good? Okay, just let me know if anything sounds off. It's one of the things about running a one-man show over here. I have to do a little bit of everything here, but just let me know if everything sounds all right. All right, perfect. Yeah, my name's Tyler here calling in. Today's webinar, really exciting. I really love doing these ones in particular. These are what I call like our Bob Ross style ones. It's a really cool way for us to do a workshop together, actually go through and learn a little bit more about the product, specifically notebooks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a few things before we go ahead and get started. These should be in the invite as well, but let me send over first the code that you guys can use, and I'll show you guys how to redeem this. This is a code that you guys can use to get 1 week of free Julius Pro. So that way, when we're working through this, you don't run into any message limits, and you get the most out of this webinar together. So that's the code you can use. I'll walk through how to use it in a second. And the other thing I will share is the drive with all of the different files I'm going to be using today. Let me find it here. And I'll share this one as well in the chat. And you could use this together. So that's that. Hopefully at the end of today's webinar, we're going to make it really easy for you to understand just what a notebook is and how it works by making one together. I think that's one of the best ways for us to learn. If you haven't used Julius before, no worries. I think notebooks, steeper learning curve, but today you're going to get all you need to know in order to do this from start to finish. I'm going to go ahead and change over my screen here. We're going to go over to my Julius window. I'm going to go over here. This is the first one that I'll show you guys. After you create a new account, this is again, after you go to julius.ai and you either sign up using your Google email address or whatever, like Apple, I think is the other sign-in option that we have. If you go over to your settings page, which we have here in the upper left-hand panel, you can go to account settings, which brings you here. And under account, you could paste in that Bob Ross code here under institutional codes. Once you press save, refresh your browser. So if I do it here, so Bob Ross 25. Once you press save, we get a free code and then it'll expire 1 week from today. Let me know if you have any issues here. But again, we're doing this just so we can work through this webinar together. That being said, I'm going to switch over to my other browser, which I have open. Let me see if this one works here. That is not it. Sorry. There we go. Okay. And this is the browser, and this has the files that I just shared with you guys. And this is basically 4 different CSVs that we'll work with. High-level overview, we have some customer information, marketing information, product information, and some sales information as well. All of this is synthetic, so it's not going to be 100% realistic. I made it as realistic as possible, actually using Julius, but we'll work through it together. And that being said, this brings us to our normal UI over here. After you first log in and after you enter the code for the first time, this is what you're going to see. This is essentially the UI in the chat thread homepage. And we actually talked through this in our last webinar, our onboarding one. Again, all of our webinars are recorded and you could refer to it there. In that webinar, we specifically talked through basics to getting started using the chat interface, ways that you could prompt Julius and upload files. But today, we're going to use the feature called Notebooks, which you see over here in the left-hand side. A couple ways that you can get started, right? The first way I would recommend folks to do outside of this webinar is to look at our templates. You know, these are pre-made notebooks that people have used or made in the past. And all you have to do is simply plug in your data and play. That's it. That's all you have to do. And then in order to make a new one, what we're going to do is just click New here, and then just click on New Notebook. And this is what we'll do together today. Where can you find the old recordings? In this YouTube channel, if you click on Live, you'll see all the previous webinars that we've done previously, and then also any of the upcoming webinars too. All right, let's work through this together. So if you're all following along, do click on New and then Notebook, and that'll bring you to this UI here. Before we dive into what we call the different cells, let me just talk to you about the little basics to navigating a notebook and what is a notebook, right? You could think of a notebook like a template, right? You could create a notebook, and later on, after you're done with your analysis, you could create multiple runs, what we call, which is just running a notebook multiple times. So it helps with reusable or repeatable analysis. That's not the only thing notebooks are good for. I think that's where a lot of folks get confused. Like, hey, what if I don't have repeatable analysis? Well, you could actually use notebooks for doing your first analysis or doing your exploratory analysis as well. And that's something that we'll walk through today. So again, you can think of notebooks like a little bit more advanced way to use Julius. There's a lot more capabilities here, a lot of good UI tips and tricks that we'll cover today. But that's just a high-level overview of what a notebook is. I'm going to go back to our notebooks overview here, and this is the notebook I just created. This is what we call a cell. A notebook is a collection of cells, fancy word for saying a way for us to tell Julius what we wanted to do, right? There's 5 or 6 different types of cells now. The main 2 that you really need to know is the source cell. This is for us adding files to Julius for it to use. And then the prompt cell, which is essentially what we tell Julius to use, to do. And that's exactly it. You could even get away with just using those 2 prompts actually, or these 2 different types of cells. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is the source cell. I'm going to add a data source. And actually, I'm going to add from my Google Drive since I already have it connected. I'm going to go to that file that I just shared with everybody. And here again, you could see all 4 of those different CSVs that I shared in that Google Drive. In case you haven't already, you could connect your Google Drive. It makes it super easy to connect files and add it directly. And that's what I did here. And I'm just going to click on one of these, hold down Shift, and select all of those by clicking on the very bottom. And this allows us to upload and select all 4 of those different files within that example drive. All right, so to do that again, just click on one of them, hold down Shift, and select all of those like that. And I'm going to press Select here. Again, the source cell is the way that we add in data for Julius to analyze. And here we go. We could see we managed to upload all 4 of those different spreadsheets there. Just like in our threads feature, you'll see different next steps or suggestions for ways that we could analyze. Feel free to use one of these if you want. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in load and preview the data. Again, this is the prompt cell, just as if you're typing or talking to Julius in threads there. And before I do that, all you have to do is press the run button in the upper left-hand corner to run the cell, or you could press Command Enter or Shift Enter depending on your operating system. And that's it. And that's essentially the easiest way to get started using a notebook. Add in your data using the source cell and start talking to Julius and using the prompt cell, just like that. And you'll see Julius again, creating the Python code, running it all inside of this environment. Again, there's no difference between a notebook environment and a thread environment. It's all the same. Cool. So here we see Julius had done what I asked it to do. It ran this Python code in order to load all 4 of those data sets there. So we have our marketing campaigns one, which we could see, customer demographics one, which we could also see here, sales and product as well. Before we keep on going, I'm going to do some slight adjustments to my UI. These are just my own preferences and ways that I like to use Julius. I'm going to close out this left-hand side panel, get it out of the way, give us more real estate to use. And I'm going to go over to the right-hand panel, and you'll see this little button above the Run All blue button. I'm going to click this one, and this will open what we call our Data Explorer. This is available in both threads and notebooks, but I like to keep this open just so I can click and expand and see all the different, what we call data frames. Very fancy word for the different tables of data that Julius is either using or is updating and making adjustments to as we work with Julius to analyze our data. So here you can see all 4 of those different files, so customer, marketing, product, and sales. Cool. I'm going to expand this window just a little bit more too. Let's see if this doesn't affect anything. There. Cool. So this is essentially how you can get started, right? So far we've created a notebook. We've added in our files by using the source cell. And then we asked Julius to load and preview the data using a prompt cell. And here we see Julius had ran it all. There's a couple ways that you could add cells, right? And this is the biggest benefit, in my opinion, of using notebooks is you could add in cells before, after, or even the middle of your work that you're doing. This is helpful for doing what we call iterative analysis, right? Sometimes you wish you had asked a question earlier. Sometimes you wished you add in data earlier. Sometimes you want to go in a different direction in the analysis that you're doing. Kind of hard to do that in our threads feature and our chat feature, which is one direction. Kind of hard to rerun cells, which I'll show in this section here. That's essentially how we can get started. And in this case, I'm just going to click here. If you hover at the very bottom, you'll see this bar pop up. You could add in any number of cells here. Code cells, which I'll talk about, and also a text cell, which I'll also talk about. But right now, let's just keep it simple. Let me just click the cell button, and this by default will add in a prompt cell. Let's do one thing next. Let's just tell Julius to do some exploratory data analysis. I love telling Julius to do this. It's a great way for Julius to get a little bit more understanding of the data and the relationships of the data. And it's something that most data analysts actually do when they're first working with a data set. What I'll do is I'll type in, can you run an exploratory data analysis and look for any interesting trends or insights in the data I uploaded. Again, you could press Command Enter or click on the Run button to run it. And we'll see Julius's think through and run it there. Cool. I saw that question, what model am I running? Right now, I believe this is, we'll check over here. If you click on the upper right-hand settings in the cogwheel, I'm running Claude 4.5 Sonnet. That's one of the perks of using our pro code that we gave out earlier. Normally, when you use the default model, this is either a mix of GPT-5 and Claude, maybe not Sonnet, but probably Claude 4. But in this case, I'm using Claude 4.5 Sonnet here. And then, yeah, you could use any of these ones as well. It really depends on what you're looking to do and the type of analysis you're doing. Anecdotally, in my opinion, I think Claude 4.5 Sonnet is really good, and it's really good at doing visualizations especially. GPT-5 is really good as well for doing some pretty complex prompts, especially the thinking. It really does help break down some of the prompts there. My only nit that I have with the GPT is that sometimes it does do a little bit more steps than when I asked it to do. It's more, trying to do additional steps versus just doing one concise thing, but that's just my own opinion. But you can give it a try and see and test it out. In fact, in our YouTube channel, we have a couple videos here. We ran the same exact notebook, same exact prompt on the same data using all 5 different models, and it's kind of interesting to see the different ways that they'll approach solving the prompt, writing the code, and visualizing data differently. All right, so we have Julius here. It ran the exploratory data analysis. A couple things you'll see are some files that it had created. And likewise, if you look over in the right-hand side on the Data Explorer, you can see the outputs as well. So here we see it started to categorize some of the revenue sources that we have in this data, maybe some of the sales that we have per channel in this data, and even maybe one based off of demographics that we have too. I'm going to scroll down here, and then you could see some of these outputs. Again, this is kind of funny looking chart. All this data is synthetic, but you sort of get the point here. And the breakdown generally by revenue, channels, customer insights, etc. I mentioned earlier that it's really easy to rerun cells, right? So let's say, for example, I wanted to do this a little bit differently. Let's say instead of making this really high level, I just wanted to tell Julius to, let's only focus on customers and customer demographics. You could simply update that cell that we had typed earlier and just click run, and we'll rerun the entire cell itself. A lot easier to do this in a notebook. I find when I first explored data, I love using notebooks because I could, make a mistake, or I could go down the wrong path and just simply update the cell and rerun it. Instead of having one giant thread of all these messages of me trying to tell Julius to go backwards, I could actually just go to the source, update it, and make adjustments as needed. But yeah, so that's why I like to really break down that sort of thought process that, hey, notebook is only for reusable analysis. No, you could use it for anything you want. And actually for exploratory data analysis or just getting basic insights, notebooks are actually really handy too. Cool, we'll let this generate. While this is going, I'm going to talk about a couple other things here. So far, we've only covered the source cell, which again, use to upload files to a notebook. We've talked about prompt cells. Both of those together make up probably 95% of all the cells you'll ever have to use. There's a couple other key cells that I'll mention. I'm going to add in a new cell here at the very bottom after this is done generating. Here we can see some cool visualizations. Again, it's kind of synthetic. It's kind of a weird chart. Cool. I have a new cell here at the very bottom. And let's change this into our code cell. Code cells are really handy in notebooks, and I think this is something that's loved by both our more technical users, those who might be more familiar with Python, R, or even SQL. So here I'll just type in a Python cell. And the reason why it's useful is because you could either take code that Julius had ran before, so I could copy all of this code and I could paste it into a cell to use. You could take code that you generated outside of Julius, whether you're using ChatGPT, OpenAI, or some other model and generating Python, and you can just run it all inside of the same notebook. Here I'll do that. Again, clicking on the run button in the upper left-hand corner, running that same Python, and it should be the same exact output that we saw from the previous code cell that we see there. See something weird going on here? I'm not sure what this is. I think something I'll flag to the team. But the gist of it is it'll run the code that you generated before, essentially. And this helps for a number of reasons, right? A lot of people wonder, like, hey, I want to use this notebook over and over again. Sometimes the same prompts give me different visualizations or different analysis, and that's actually pretty common, not just with Julius, but with any other tool that you're using. For those non-technical users like myself, I learned that these models are all non-deterministic, and that means there's multiple different ways that Julius and any model can fulfill the prompt, right? And that's essentially solve what I'm asking it to do. That means there's an infinite number of ways it could have visualized this chart, different colors it could have used, different ways it formatted the chart itself, or maybe a different chart entirely, right? Depending on how I prompted it. Sometimes that's great, especially when you're doing some really high level analysis and you don't really know exactly where you're trying to go, and you don't know what type of visualizations you want. Other times it's not so great, right? Sometimes you might want more reproducible results or more consistent results too. That's where these code cells come in, right? Adding in a code cell helps make and lock in the exact code that Julius will use in order to process the data, right? So whether it's code to analyze the data and sort of filter it, maybe do some calculations, or if it's code on how to visualize it, right? If there's a specific type of chart with specific types of fonts, using the code cells is really handy for that. If you don't know how to write code, just like myself, no worries, right? What you can do is if you go to any of these cells that had ran previously, you could go to the very top here. There's going to be a little stamp icon that we see right here, right? And it's called Turn into Repeatable Steps. You can click on this, and what this will do is it's going to separate out my prompt, so the load and preview the data prompt, from the actual code that Julius had generated, right? Essentially locking it into place. If I click accept two changes here at the bottom, you'll see that just as I just mentioned, so it's separated out into a text cell here, so load and preview the data, and then that same exact code that Julius had done to load and preview the data. Really handy. So again, if you're doing a visualization, right, you want a pie chart, for example, you want it to be formatted the same exact way, and you want it to process your data the same way, use that button after Julius has generated the code, and anytime you run the cell or the notebook again afterwards, it's going to do that same exact code to generate that same pie chart going forward. Really handy. What's the difference between your and Jupyter notebooks? There actually isn't too much of a difference, right? I would say we actually use Jupyter Notebooks internally. Only key difference here is that it's powered by Julius, right? You could bring in, you could use Julius to either generate any of the Python cells and Jupyter, like the cells for you, the code, or you could even bring in, so if you click on this import button, you could even bring in some Jupyter Notebooks that you used in the past, and you could also export them by clicking on the download and download as Jupyter Notebook. So there aren't too many differences outside of the part that it's powered by Julius, right? And it has all the other different features that we have, which I'll talk about that allow for scheduling notebooks and also for sharing and collaborating in real time too. Does it understand other languages or only English? It understands all languages, right? You could either type in the prompts itself to tell Julius like, hey, whatever you want to do, maybe in Spanish or whatever language, and you could go generate it and Julius will do the outputs in that language that you're talking to it in. That's one way. The other way that you could do this is go into the chat settings, go into customize Julius, and you could tell it, hey, always respond to me in the language of your choice. This way you don't have to put it into every single cell or every single prompt that you type to Julius going forward. So another easy way for you to have Julius work in the language that you're looking for. All right, let's do a couple more visualizations here. Let's generate a visualization showing sales over time by customer and product. What I'm going to do is, again, click on the run button, and then we'll see this generate one more time. While this is going, a couple other things I'll talk about. Sharing, right? So cool thing about about Julius Notebooks is it's easy to share these notebooks. And the really cool thing is if someone else joins this notebook as I'm working in it, they'll see it in real time, just like a Google Doc or a Notion doc, right? That means they could see the prompts that I'm typing out in real time, and they could see Julius generate the code and outputs in real time too. And this is really handy, especially from what we've seen for enterprise teams or for people doing research at universities, right? If you're collaborating on a project and you're not all in the same room and you kind of want to work on the same notebook or see the same analysis done in real time, really easy to do so in Julius using our share feature there. So that's one of the cool features. So basically I'm saying that Jupyter Notebook powered by something else. Yeah, it's essentially our notebooks feature took a lot of inspiration from Jupyter Notebooks, for example. And it has a lot of features outside of that too, that like the sharing feature, scheduling feature, which I'll talk about, and then some of the other cool reusability and reusing notebooks features that I'll talk about as well. But yeah, the sharing is one of those, which is really, really handy. Cool. Let's imagine that we're like done with our analysis, right? Maybe I'm building this notebook so I could run it every week and I want to get a report for my operations team. Let's add in another cell here and let's say, can you summarize findings and any key insights? I want to share this with my marketing and operations/sales team. This is one way that you could sort of package up all of the different learnings from this notebook so you could share it. That's one way. We'll see if this runs. And here we see one of the outputs here, executive summary followed by customer demographic highlights. And the other really cool thing that you could do is click on this upper right-hand button too. This is the generate analysis report. Same thing that we had in the chats feature. What this does is it takes away all the different cells, the different prompts, and all the different code that we used throughout this analysis and makes it into something a little bit more digestible for teams that really don't want to go too deep in the weeds and just want to report on findings, analysis, or insights as well. So we'll see this generate here. This again is probably useful for like really one-off reports that you can generate. And here we see the same exact thing, quick overview, headline of findings, and then also some charts and some summaries as well. Not sure why the charts didn't print, but typically it'll add in the charts and visualizations here. What you could also do is click on edit and you could change any of this as well. This is all in Markdown, so if you want to update the formatting or if you want to just delete or remove sections, you could also do so in here. And you could download as a PDF too, so you could save it there. This one's kind of weird because I'm in the editing. Let me see here. Cancel, download as PDF. You could package this up and send it as an email too. But going back to our notebook here, that's one way that you could sort of package up results, right? If you click on the upper bar here and you click on October 2nd, 2025, this will open up the detail panel. And here's where you could do some other adjustments and customization as well. So here I could title this as Sales Notebook for Weekly, let's say Marketing Meeting, right? And you could give it a description. We'll say, I use this notebook to analyze my product, sales, and customer information. There. Other cool things you could do is you could add in specific custom instructions for this notebook. So if, for example, you wanted to only visualize charts in a certain way, or you wanted to use a really specific formula, you could add that in here, and this will be specific to this notebook whenever it's run. Lastly, this is the part that I love the best, is the ability to schedule this notebook, right? So if I click recurring schedule, you can actually have this notebook be rerun periodically whenever you want it to be. This is a new feature that we recently rolled out about a week or 2 weeks ago. Once you enable the schedule, you could rename it. So I'm going to leave this, I think sales notebook for my weekly meeting is fine. You could add in your time zone. And then here I'm going to say, hey, maybe I have my marketing and sales meeting every week. I want this to be ran every Monday at 9 a.m. so I could review it, right? That's essentially it. It'll run the notebook that same exact way. There's not much to explain there. It'll run through all the different cells and it'll redo all of that analysis that we had done previously at that time at 9 a.m. on Mondays. Other really cool thing you could do that we just added, I think a few days ago actually, is the Slack integration. Easy way for you to add Julius to your Slack workspace if you do use Slack. And what you can actually do once you connect it is have the results be sent to a specific channel. You could have Julius summarize all of the different findings, take all of the key graphs and charts that you had made, and just send it to a channel and have it automate the reporting or the analysis that you're doing. We use this internally a lot. Again, it's a really new feature, but my favorite part is just seeing the charts populate in real time in Slack. I spend probably a little bit too much time in Slack, but that's one way that you could schedule your analysis there too. Finally, what I'll do now is actually just test this out. If I go back to my notebook here, sorry, I clicked the wrong button. Where did I go here? If I go back to my notebook and I go to my sales notebook here and I go to schedule, it looks like I didn't save it. So let me click this button again. What you could actually do is press test now and you'll see how this actually will work. Julius will have you upload the data, or we'll use the data that we uploaded, and then it'll run through all the different cells. For notebooks, I would say it's always best when you're scheduling it to use a data connector. That's another feature that we have over here. The reason why you want to use data connectors when you're scheduling is because you want to have live data to analyze, right? There really isn't a point to analyzing the same exact CSV over and over again, in my opinion. In reality, you want to use a data connector. So in this case, I have a Postgres connector, but we have a whole bunch of different connectors here that you could use depending on where your data lives. Whether it's Postgres, BigQuery, Snowflake, or some of our other ones like Google Ads and Meta Ads too. That way, you basically give Julius direct connection to your data when your data is updated in real time. When you schedule the notebook to be rerun and the analysis to be rerun, it'll all be using live and fresh data, which is really handy versus using one-off uploads like a Google Sheet or a CSV. So here we can see that the analysis, or sorry, not this one. Here we can see this instant run and it did all the different cells and the different analysis again for me. Cool. So if you go to, where was I at? If I go back to my notebook here and you go to schedule, you could see the schedule all set up now. If I press save. Finally, if you go over to the notebooks page, if you click on the schedule here, you can see all the different notebooks that you've scheduled, as well as all the different runs for those notebooks after they've been scheduled to run. So in this case, I've been running this notebook every week for the last few weeks, or it looks like every day for the last few weeks. And you can see all the different analysis that was generated here using, looks like this one's using my synthetic data set as well, so it's kind of messy, but you could track it there as well. Again, it's probably best to be using a data connector for some of these. Awesome. I'm going to take a quick pause there. I'm going to go look at the chat and see if there's any questions. I think I answered that question. Yep. When I asked it to generate a graph, it makes mistakes, like things are missing, or in the HTML graph, the drop drop-down option for sorting are not functioning well. How do you fix those? That's a good question, right? First, if I go back to my notebook here, right? Let's go back to this one. The key thing I would say is first double check in the Data Explorer what Julius is using, right? I would say 95% of the time when something goes wrong with a regular sort of chart like this one here, or a visualization like this, like if, for example, the numbers are skewed or sometimes the months just are ugly, like it doesn't format it correctly, a lot of times it's because the data that Julius is using in the data frame, so the table, what we see here on the right side, it's just using either the wrong data frame or that data is just not formatted correctly. Right, so I'll give you an example. Here I see the data is organized from 2022 all the way up until 2024. One time I saw this completely scrambled, which really didn't make any sense, right? I would say, hey, why are the dates out of order? Well, in reality, it's because I looked at the data frame Julius was using, and all the dates were scrambled, and there were actually duplicate dates and duplicate rows. The other way that you could check here is if you look a little bit above here. You don't have to be super familiar with Python, but if you look at what Julius is using, you can see in some of this code, if I expand this over a little bit, you can actually see what Julius is referring to. These are what they call variables, and this is what Julius is pulling in to create these visualizations, right? Oftentimes, in my experience, 99% of the time when it's missing data or it's using the wrong data, it's because something's wrong with this data frame over here in the right-hand side. When I see this a lot, it's because maybe I'm doing analysis for like hours, right? After a certain amount of time, you're going to have maybe a couple hundred different data frames or tables over here in the right-hand panel. This is either from me uploading data to Julius or that Julius has generated from manipulating the data, maybe filtering it or running some sort of code on it. So sometimes I don't blame Julius. Sometimes it gets confused on which one it should be using to make the visualization, especially when the names of these, like monthly versus monthly counts versus monthly sales, they start to get a lot more familiar. That's where I would say just double check the data frame that Julius is using there. For the second part of your question, for what you're referring to is if you go to chart themes here, there actually is an interactive chart. This is still relatively new, but what this does is if I go to the bottom, and I add a cell and I say, generate me a quick pie chart with drop downs to filter based on customer demographics, maybe. Julius is actually going to create an HTML chart for us to use. Let me think about this. Yeah, Julius will generate an HTML chart for us to use. Here we can see it's actually running that code now that I've selected interactive chart. Still is in beta. If it's missing a dropdown, chances are it's because it just didn't get it right in the prompt. That's where I would say might make more sense to either prompt it again, making sure to be really clear about keeping all the dropdowns you want. The other thing that I've seen, and I know that this is an issue I've ran into, is there's actually a certain limit of lines here for the Python that Julius can generate, especially for these HTML style charts. We'll see after this generates how many lines it is, but I've seen ones where it gets up to the max, which I think is up to like 400 or 450 different lines. Something that the team is conscious about. This interactive chart feature is something that we built out maybe like a month ago and really was a one-off. But I think they're aware of the line limitation. I think that explains some of the reason why I've seen Julius drop either parts of the chart that I was looking for or just get stuck. Here we see Julius was able to do 151, but I think, again, it's because this is a pretty basic chart here. But you can actually hover over it just like this that we've seen. This is all inline, and you could even filter based off of gender if you want, age group, or income bracket there. But I would say probably try to prompt it. If you do see that it gets beyond 450 or just gets stuck, one potential workaround is just to copy the code, paste it into another tool that, whether it's Julius, you could actually just tell Julius, update this to make it less rows. There are a few workarounds that I can imagine since this is still in beta as well. The other really cool thing while we're on this topic is you can actually click this HTML and you can share it too. Why is this helpful? Well, you can actually embed it. This is something that one of our people on our team made recently. And you could embed this, and that's It's really handy to do this, especially in things like Notion, right? So a lot of power users of Notion, including some folks on the team here, love using Notion, especially for some of our meetings. You could take these charts from Julius and embed it directly in a Notion doc. We have our weekly marketing meeting. We have one of these visualizations created by Julius in there, and you can actually interact with it just the same way that we do in Julius too. So really handy. Will you share sample data so we could use it when, so yeah, let me reshare this one here. This was the one I shared earlier. So if I go to my drive, Julius example files, I'll share this in case you didn't get the link earlier. And also I'll send this via email as well after this webinar too. Wondering similarly, what if Julius interprets the data incorrectly? That's something that happens, right? I think with all LLMs and all tools that you're using, there's always an asterisk about like the results being accurate, right? Something that we're conscious about, and we're always trying to improve the accuracy of Julius. But one way that I've seen folks do it, again, just keep your side panel open and just inspect. First, for formatting mistakes, that's the biggest one that I've seen that affects my accuracy of my visualizations. But if you're talking specifically about like the type of the analysis that Julius is doing, a couple things that you could do. We have these cells here. You could tell Julius to fact check itself or just double check the calculations is one way. The other thing you could do is you don't have to be familiar with code, but when using our data connectors, we actually pull in the data using Julius, and it really does remove a lot of the issues with structure or data cleanliness and stuff like that that I've seen also affect my analysis. I would say use your data connectors where possible. Let me just demo that really quickly. So if I connect here to a source cell and I add in my Postgres connector, it just makes it a lot more easy for Julius to grab the data consistently. And a lot of times when I'm having issues with Julius's accuracy, it's because it's either truncating the data, using the wrong data frame, or has mistransformed or like made the data frame in a way that's it's just not as usable, especially for visualizations there. But always fact check your data too. And one way, and there's a couple ways that you could do this. So let me finish this thread first so I don't get distracted. Connect to your data source like Postgres, for example. If I wanted to say, can you grab me customers by, or let me just say customers from my Postgres connector. There's a lot less that Julius can go wrong here. It's literally just going to write the query to grab the data. And I've seen this help out a lot for the accuracy, right? And then once you do have a solid, either query or you have some Python that you do know works perfectly fine, like this isn't like, once I do have a query that I know works correctly and I fact check it, like I run it on my own data tool or my query tool, then what you could do is what we talked about earlier in the webinar, take that query out. So like this one, create a code cell, for example, and then you could just paste it in here. And that way there's nothing that can go wrong with Julius's results there. That's sort of the other workaround there. But again, as always, the asterisk there is double check the work in some way. You guys know your data the best. I know my data the best internally. So when there's numbers that just seem off, and this is what I'll show after this, as I inspect the data, that's a couple ways that I've at least fact checked the numbers that Julius is running. So here we have Julius had generated the customers from this. I would fact check the query here, especially if it's like a Postgres query or if it's like a SQL query. And then you can just double check the results there too. Internally, one way, so I'll talk about this, one way that I do this is I use Julius to generate visualizations for me that I use in my marketing meetings and my growth meetings. Before I present the analysis, just as is, I always just double check the query itself, and whether that's me actually reading the query that Julius wrote or putting it into ChatGPT and just saying double check, or putting it into Claude and saying just double check, does this work the way that I want it to? But again, it's mostly from Julius's understanding of my data, that where it could either pull from the wrong table or just mistransform something somewhere, but always just double check. The other really easy way to double check is by using the Data Explorer. And any one of these tables or data frames that Julius generates, you could always export it directly or download it directly. So whether it's a CSV or by exporting, if I scroll down here, you could export any of these to Google Sheets. You generate this one. And this just gives me another way to, hey, let me just double check against what I have, whether that means filtering and fact checking some of these results, or by, using a formula and then joining on something that I know for sure is accurate too. Can you explain the cells that you mentioned? There isn't a cell specifically for double checking, right? That's something that we're working on internally for just tracking the accuracy of Julius. But what I've seen users do is double check that the results before of the previous cell are correct and that the calculations are accurate. This only solves like half of the problem, right? This is like using Julius to double check itself. At the end of the day, if it's because like something's wrong with the data or it's using the wrong row, just double check that yourself too. But this is one way that I've seen some users, including us, do, is just use a prompt cell for Julius to fact check itself too. But again, big asterisk there, double check your work whenever you're using Julius too. Cool, so we see Julius is running that way as well. For the most part, whenever we use Julius internally, we always double check the data, especially when you know, like, for the most part, like 90% of your data, like, is whether it's right or wrong based off of what it's generating, right? So it looks correct. For example, we do analysis on our product, like, hey, product usage and product adoption and things like that. Whether we're using Julius or we're using another tool like Grafana or PostHog or any other tool to visualize, Redash, always double check it based off of your own understanding of your data too. It depends on what you're working on as well. So do I get the difference between you and Jupyter? No, it's a common question, right? So with notebooks, there's a lot more functionality and features. Again, I don't consider ourselves like a competitor to Jupyter notebooks. In reality, it's like a Jupyter notebook plus one, right? It's like there's a lot more features and functionality that we've built out in addition to Jupyter. And that includes the ability for you to schedule, to run all of these, to have the results delivered straight to your Slack channel. Forgive me if I don't really understand Jupyter notebooks. I'm not a technical user, so I don't really use Jupyter myself. But from my own understanding, you could schedule these, you can collaborate in real time, etc. But I don't consider us a replacement. It's just with Julius, notebooks is one of our features, and that's one way that you could use Julius if you're familiar with a Jupyter notebook style environment. And again, you could just import any notebook that you've worked on as well, or you could export any analysis that you're doing in Julius as a Jupyter notebook. So again, you could use both as well. You can't prompt in Jupyter and data connectors run SQL directly against your database. Can you not run SQL in Jupyter notebooks? Is it mostly like you have to connect the same way? Sorry, I'm myself not as familiar, but that sounds correct. Yeah, where you could connect directly to your Postgres, or you can connect to any other data source. Is that not something you can do in Jupyter? That's interesting. Got it. You'd have to wrap it first in Python. Gotcha. Interesting. Cool. Okay, so really quickly before we wrap up, I just want to show, so this is again, we dove a little bit deep on some of the really good questions, but let's imagine if we zoom back out, right, and we have a notebook that we're done using. You could simply go to Notebooks here in the upper left-hand corner, and you can click on the play button here, and this will let you rerun pretty much that notebook again and again and again as much as you need it to. This way, if there's ever any data that you want to update manually, or if you want to make adjustments or updates to the cells, you could also do so there. And that's it. And that's essentially the basics to using a notebook. The other cool things that you could do, again, I mentioned, is you could share these with other folks, or you could even share them. Let me open up my side panel here. If you go to the notebook templates, you could also view some of these ones here, or you could even publish a notebook that you worked on as well. Just some of the different ways that we've tried to encourage folks to try out the different things that users have been building at Julius. It's the only integration. Basically, Julius does not have a lot of connectors as well. Yeah, so I would say just stay tuned, right? Again, we've only really started jamming on connectors over the past month, maybe month and a half is when we've released our first one, starting out with just Postgres. If you do wish that there was more connectors, feel free to request them. There's ways that you could do so here. Using our Typeform, we monitor this a lot. In fact, we just made these last 2 or 3 connectors over the past week or so. But if there's one that has a lot of demand, that's sort of how it guides us where we should be building. Let us know. MCP works terribly, something that the team is working on. Again, MCPs are pretty funky when it comes to it. They're still relatively new, but the team is hard at work trying to make sure that MCPs are working more stably, right? So you can get the most use out of it. And in fact, the team's jamming on it today too. So be really excited once we officially launch it. I would say it's actually in beta right now. We're announcing it shortly. Can the report be sent automatically to an email? Yes, it can, right? So once you do schedule your notebook, if you go to your notebooks here, if you go to notebooks and you click on the schedule, if you go to schedule here, when this is done generating, what you'll get inside of here is this email, which is task update as well. This is one way that we've sort of enabled the notebook to be sent to your email. But the other way that we're trying to do this as well is to generate the actual report and findings here. So the stuff that we covered before, and have this actually be shown. It's a little bit more digestible than, hey, your notebook ran, but this is the only way that we currently support the results being delivered to your notebook or to your email. So essentially it's this report and saying that, hey, your notebook had ran once this is done generating. But yeah, it's on the roadmap for us to deliver any of the visualizations or the key summaries as well. I would say give it a try. Try connecting it to your Slack too. I've seen what we can do is maybe connect it to our community Slack so I could show off what it looks like. But what we do is essentially summarize the analysis that was done. We take something similar to this, including any of these visualizations, and then that's what gets sent to our Slack. That's what the team is planning on having delivered to your email as well. But currently, the only way that you can do this is like this. I think no, nothing like that. Cool. Awesome. Before we hop, thank you guys again so much for joining and for all the really good questions. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to join our community Slack. It's a great way for you to let us know any feedback that you have, or if you have any other questions, or if you're curious about the different ways that people are using Julius, you could ask there. Other resources for you is if you click in the side panel and you go to our documentation, has everything that you need about everything related to Julius, including notebooks here, videos, what are notebooks, videos that I made, and then even different things like the different cells as well. There you could check out too. Finally, if there's any other questions, if you guys have about Julius or its capabilities, either stay tuned for our next webinars, which we host every week. Next week, we do have our second ever Spanish speaking webinar, which I know is really, really popular from users. So look forward to that one on Tuesday for onboarding and everything related to Julius in Spanish. And then also you can look at our YouTube for both our previous webinars and also our upcoming webinars too. Finally, if you really need some help, you could reach out to us using this help button in our 3 dots here. And you can either file the ticket if there's a billing issue, product issue, or account issue, or you could also reach out to us at team@julius.ai if you have any other questions as well. I want to say thank you again so much for joining and for all your guys' questions. I'll send after this a recap of what we covered, the code that we use, and also the files in case you weren't able to join earlier. And again, thank you guys so much for joining. We'll look forward to chatting with you in the next webinar. Hope you have a great rest of your evening, morning, or night, wherever you're at, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.